All right. Introduction to the European Convention's court system. This is just going to be a quick video. If there is anything you think that I missed, I probably did, and you should look up the other videos. I just want to begin with explaining what the convention is, what the point of the court is, what part the court sort of holds within what system that is, and then also explaining just the nature of the court as an international court, comparatively to then primarily the EU court. To begin with, it was a consequence of several European actors within several nations gathering to create a sort of convention which doesn't exactly watch over, let's say, the usual court in a nation would, but it's more of a court which looks over the ideas which several nations have together agreed upon through a treaty. And through this treaty then, a constitution has been made. A sort of constitution. And these are concepts that have been discussed together with several nations, and it's the role of the court then to sort of uphold these situations. Now, how that exactly works, you'll have to watch through the next videos to understand. Starting off with the European Convention is not that easy, mostly because it's quite confusing, at least from a Swedish judicial perspective. The most hard part for me was understanding what conformity meant, which is the most important part of the European Convention. It needs to be able to conform to several needs and several ideas at the same time. Now, the way you could look at this is, I'm going to go through this in another video with what conformity exactly is. But imagine the game of football and the concept of football being several things at once through conformities. The way I mean by that is, for instance, that in professional football, you have offside, you have yellow and red cards, you have extra time, you have several things that are, you could call the official rules of professional football play. Now, you could also argue that this is the most accurate version of football. This is what football is, meaning football is what it is within professional standards. Then you could take that as the standard way of looking at it, and then you can make a version which conforms to the standard, but is not exactly the standard. By that I mean removing offside, not having a field with 11 players per team, maybe changing the rules for the goalkeeper, letting them save the goal with their... These are ways of understanding things and conforming to them, which is not exactly at the center of what it is, but it's close enough where you could still say that it's the same thing that it was before you conformed it into something new. That is at least how I've understood how conformity works. If anyone else has a better idea, please let me know. Going on, now I just want to go through real quick what the European Convention has for sections. It has primarily 3 sections which actually responds upon people's applications. But you should know, for the most part, these applications do not work if you haven't first gone through your own nation's court. And it's still technically possible to get through without the direct need of your own nation's court. Such cases could be when Article 6, which is the right to a trial, hasn't been met. Then if you're not getting a trial, but you're trying to say that you have the right to a trial, then maybe you would have to go directly through them. But usually you go through your own nation's court, and then you can give out an application, which usually also is the biggest part of filling out, or for a judge to understand what the application actually wants. They need to first be able to understand how the nation has applied that specific situation. Meaning it's not enough to just have a situation which implies issues within rights. You also need to have an example of when the court actually applied this, and given that you can take whatever that respective nation did, or whatever that nation did within that situation, and then apply the convention's own laws and principles and so on, depending on what the situation needs. Either it's going to be invalid, or it's going to go on to have a decision made, or go on to the next step of, or next hierarchy of courts. So, individual applications, there are a whole lot of them in the beginning. Most of them, a great majority, never even go through into the step of having 3 judges look at them. Usually because most of the problems already have been solved through other case laws. And then you have 3 judges, the committee. This is the first official group of judges which would look at your case and possibly be able to make a decision upon it. So if you've reached 3 judges looking at your case, congratulations, you might just be on your way to going to the Grand Chamber. Now, with that said, either the 3 judges say that it's invalid, that is an admissibility decision, or a judgment is made. Now, in this picture, it doesn't really show the connection, but I'm quite sure that you could have the 3 judges move on to asking 7 judges to look at the case. However, I guess there is a sort of filtration system in between which could lend you to having 7 judges look at your case. Now, these are cases that are quite obviously needed to go up to the Grand Chamber, or is likely to go up to the Grand Chamber, and then directly goes then to 7 judges. Now, this is where it can get very confusing. It already is, as you can see. And also, this picture is directly from the European Convention website. So this is their own image. The chamber looks either at the case in the sense where they themselves apply whether it's valid or not. They themselves decide on how to look at the situation. And then you also have situations where the seven judges, meaning the chamber, has the role of approving a case up to the Grand Chamber. Now, this could happen either through the chamber themselves looking at the case and themselves judging it, or you could have it in the case of the chamber receiving this case right after the individual application, because you could quite quickly see that this is going to become something big and important. An example of that I could give from Swedish courts, which I cannot confirm right now through having read doctrine if this is an actual precedent through this case law, but I am 99% sure. In this case, there was a man who had filmed his daughter-in-law in the shower. He'd left his camera and tried to hit it while she was about to shower. She found the camera. She went to the courts. It went up to the highest court, but then the Supreme Court of Sweden said that this wasn't illegal because it hadn't been actually stated in the law that this was illegal. So there wasn't any way of actually prosecuting the man because formally there was no law which looked at a situation where someone tried to film someone else in their own shared home, and the other person also, I should add, is underage. Or at least right at the edge of underage. I'm pretty sure she was underage. Doesn't really matter though, ethically. Anyways, this is a case where Sweden then straight up said you can film your daughter-in-law in her own home while she is showering, and it's not illegal. Now you can imagine if this individual application is going through and they see that Sweden hadn't written a law for a situation which was very obviously illegal, and then you could pretty quickly assume that the chamber is going to take over this case and directly look at it to see if it's going to the Grand Chamber, and then usually, or in this case, the Grand Chamber received the case through the chamber. This is a case where you don't need the committee. You don't need to even ask yourself if a single judge is going to take it into admissibility. This is a case where something is so obvious that it goes straight to the chamber, which goes to the Grand Chamber. Yes, this is just a quick walkthrough of how the system works. This was very vague, it was very weird, but this is good to look at with other videos. So I hope this does help holistically, but I am sure this is not going to be enough to understand ECHR in itself. Not at all.